Hi, this is Sascha Segan from PCMag.com, here to compare some of the hottest phones on the market today. And so what I have here is I have a Samsung Galaxy S7, and this is the S7. And then I also have a pre-production LG G5. Here's our G5. And then I also have this very nice, on the market for quite a while, iPhone 6s, still the leader from Apple. So I wanted to step through and show you the difference between these phones and the difference between some of their features and performance and their shape and size, and then hopefully you can figure out which one you want for yourself. So let's start. So as you can tell, the 6S is the smallest of the three with a 4.7-inch screen. When I go to the Samsung, we go to a 5.1-inch screen, and we can see it's a slightly larger body. Okay, but I find the Samsung still basically a one-handed phone. I can still fit this in my hand. It's like, I think it's 2.74 inches wide. The LG is a little bit wider than that. It's just a little bit above my one-handed hand size. Now, some people with larger hands won't have a problem with that. This is a 5.3-inch screen. And now the LG and Samsung screens are much higher resolution than the iPhone. These are Quad HD screens. These are 2560 by 1440, so much higher resolution screens. And as you can see, the S7 and the G5, 1136 by 640. There we go. The S7 and the G5 have these always-on screens, and so they're always showing you the time and date and some notification information while the screen is supposedly off. But one thing I've noticed is that the Samsung's always-on screen much brighter. I don't know if you can see it from here, but the LG uses a LCD screen. Samsung uses AMOLED. The always-on aspect of the AMOLED feels much brighter. And in fact, if I turn the screens on themselves, and with the LG, I use this back power button to turn on the screen. It's kind of a signature LG feature. So I turn the screens all the way on, and there's definitely a difference in the color saturation of these screens. Samsung screen feels a little brighter, feels a little punchier. LG is if you like cooler colors, and this is very typical for an LCD. And you find that if I pick up the Apple as well, the Apple screen's performance seems very similar in terms of brightness and color balance to the LG's. Both of these are using high-quality LCDs. So, so let's go to another thing that's very important for everybody, battery life. Now, we've tested all of these phones with basic battery tests, and I've found actually that the Samsung S7 has the longest battery life. In our video rundown test, I got 9 hours of battery life with this thing, about 6.5 hours of heavy use. Now, with the LG, I got about 7 hours, and with the iPhone, I only got like 4.5 hours. If you look at how small and slim the iPhone is, it doesn't have a very big battery. This is a complaint that a lot of iPhone users have. Now, the LG has another factor that will make some people very happy, which is that if I press this little button on the bottom, I can snap off the bottom of the phone and I can remove the battery. Now, I can remove the battery and I can replace, I could even replace the bottom of the phone with something like this, which is a camera grip that has an extended battery in it. This battery is 2,800 milliamp hours. This camera grip will take you to 4,000 milliamp hours. That would give you more battery life than the Samsung S7, but at the cost of having this chunky piece on the bottom of your phone. And now the chunky piece has advantages. You can turn on the camera by switching it like this. It has a dual detent camera shutter, but it does make your phone a little more chunky. I'm going to put the standard bottom back on the LG. Okay, so let's talk about performance for a moment. Now, the iPhone has Apple's A9 processor. This is Apple's latest processor, whereas the Samsung and the LG both have Qualcomm Snapdragon 820. This is the new Qualcomm Snapdragon processor. It's much faster than the last generation. And you may say, oh, why should I upgrade from the S6 to the S7? One of the reasons, other than the fact that by the way, the S7, unlike these two other phones, waterproof. A lot of people will love that. One of the reasons you might want to upgrade is this, it appears to be dramatically increased performance, at least in benchmarks. Let me show you some of the benchmarks we did. Up on the screen here, yes, I'm pointing with a selfie stick. I'm a phone guy. So up on the screen here we have Antutu. Now Antutu is a really popular benchmark program. It is also largely bogus and should not be trusted by itself. Companies cheat on Antutu. Antutu gives weird results sometimes, but in terms of rough trends, it is relatively decent and reliable. A lot of people use it. And you see here, so here we have the Galaxy S5, Galaxy S6, Galaxy S7. And the scores are like both in the 50-something thousand range, and then the Galaxy S7 is double. And we have the LG G3, the V10, and the G5. And the G3 and the V10 are both coming in the 40s, and then the G5 is up in 118,000. And we see on the G5, the S7, and the iPhone, we got our 118,000, our 123,000, our 135,000, and like 10% difference on Antutu doesn't really matter in terms of performance. What's important is that in terms of single core performance, which is where, which really affects how you do most of your day-to-day functions, you've seen a dramatic improvement from last year's generation to this year's generation with the G5 and the S7. And now they're pretty much matching up to the iPhone, which has always been a performance leader. I'm going to get you up some graphics benchmarks here too. So we have our graphics benchmarks, and this is GFX Bench, which is a very reliable standard graphics benchmark. And using the 1080p Manhattan off-screen test, which is a test that all of the phones could successfully run. As we go from S5, S6, S7, we have 12 frames per second, and then we have 21 frames per second, and then we have 48 frames per second. Okay, so once more, like a doubling in performance from the S6 to the S7 generation. And then G3, V10, G5 should be the same, right? Right. So we have our 12 frames per second on the G3, we go to 15 frames per second on the V10, and then we go to 39 frames per second on the G5. And so once more, big jump in performance from last year's model to this year's model. And the LG and S7 have pretty similar performance. So the S7 seems to be doing a little better here. I think that's because our LG is a pre-production model. The firmware hasn't been tuned yet. I think in the final model, we probably will see better performance. Now over here we have our iPhone, and the iPhone's telling you 56 frames per second. And so that's faster than any of these Android phones. And that's because of the iPhone's lower screen resolution. And the iPhone also has some great gaming APIs. And that means, sorry for Android folks. I love Android phones. I'm recommending these Android phones highly. But the iPhone is still the best phone for gaming. OK, let's talk about cameras, because that's something that everybody uses a lot, right? OK, so the Samsung went from a 16 megapixel camera down to a 12 megapixel camera with this generation. And they have a 5 megapixel camera on the front. And you think, they went down? Why did they go down? And they went down because they added focus pixels, which means that in low light, the camera focuses much, much faster than it used to. Also, it has much better white balance in low light. LG, meanwhile, went in a totally different direction. They have a 16 megapixel camera on the back, but they also have an 8 megapixel wide angle camera, and they have an 8 megapixel camera on the front. Apple, of course, has their 12 megapixel on the back, and let me double check the Apple one, because I have not memorized everything always. Apple has their 12 megapixel on the back, and their 5 megapixel on the front. Right, 5, not 8. Okay, so let me show you some photos that I took with all of these. Okay, so here we have some photos that I took in good light with all of these generations of cameras. And so these are like 3 years worth of phones here from Samsung and LG and an Apple phone. And you see that in good light, going from this last year, which is this row, to this year, which is this row, not much of an improvement. In fact, as we went from the S6 to the S7, You might not be able to see it on this video because of resolution, but you see a little less detail on the S7 because it's lower megapixels, okay? And the 6S also looks great. And with the G5, you also have the option of that wide-angle camera, which gives you this nice fisheye option if you're taking photos of large groups of people or landscapes. It's a really cool option. The S5, by the way, had a serious handshake problem when I was using it. Definitely, if you're upgrading from an S5, you'll find any of this year's phones to be amazing. But so not a big difference in the regular light. So let's take a look at low-light photos. Okay, so low-light photos. First of all, the S5, once again, lousy. S6, you have a lot more detail, but there's a lot of noise in here, and the color is off. S7, there's a little less detail because lower megapixels, but the noise is gone. You have these nice even areas, and the white balance is better. So the S7 is showing better low light performance. We go down to the LGs. The G3 already did pretty well. We jump up to the V10 and the G5, and the G5, to me, seems to be between the two Samsungs. We don't quite have the brightness and the evenness that we have on the S7, but we have a lot less noise than we have on the S6. So the G5 is doing pretty well, and it has that great zoom out mode. In my mind, not quite up to the S7. 6S, Apple, noisy as heck. Apple, is getting outpaced by these LG and Samsung phones on the camera right now. I also wanted to show you what it looks like from the selfie camera. So now we have our selfie camera comparison. The reason the G5 looks so zoomed in, by the way, is that it uses an 8 megapixel camera as opposed to some of the other 5 megapixel selfie cameras. And this is a pixel to pixel crop, so that's what's happening there. But you also see that they're all lousy. You know what? They have selfie flash. Selfie flash works, but your selfies in low light are all gonna look kind of dim. The 6S, you notice, is kind of the worst of the bunch. Samsung and LG tend to smooth you out. They have this thing called a beauty filter that's automatically turned on. It's hard to turn off. It smooths out your face. But they also manage to avoid this serious noisiness we get on the Apple 6S in low light. So that's the cameras. I would say right now the S7 is ahead by a nose, but once again, we have a pre-production G5, so LG could yet pull ahead with the final model. They both beat Apple's pants off, though. So let's talk about some other things on these phones. One thing I wanted to talk about is modem and network performance. And you think that's a little wonky, but these are connected devices, right? So them being connected is super important. And as we went from the various generations, 2 generations ago with the G3 and the S5, we had Category 4 LTE modems. Last year was Category 6. This year is Category 9. That's going to mean the most recent Qualcomm modems, which come with the Snapdragon 820 in these phones. I know on the S7 I saw definitely better capture of weak LTE signals. It's because of something called True Signal, which Qualcomm introduced on the LG V10. But better capture of LTE signals on either of these guys than on the Apple 6S. I haven't compared these in terms of signal capture from the S7 to the G5 yet, because once again, pre-production G5 not tuned for our networks. But I'm thinking that they're both Snapdragon 820 phones. They're both going to do very well. Now, lest you think that I am punishing Apple, lest you think I am biased against Apple or I have a problem with Apple, I do not have a problem with Apple. Okay, the iPhone is a terrific phone, and let me explain one reason why the iPhone is a terrific phone. So I get this S7, and what is on this S7? 12 Verizon apps. Okay, I also have the Sprint one here. It's got a ton of Sprint apps. The bloatware problem on some of these phones has gone berserk. You don't see this on the LG G5, but you see something else that's weird on the LG G5, which is, this is an international LG G5, so it doesn't have bloatware, but LG really screwed with the Android interface. There's no app drawer. I can't pull out the app drawer. I'm an old school Android guy. This is freaking me out, the lack of an app drawer. And so you see these inconsistent interfaces, the bloatware. Apple's interface is always Apple's interface. And Apple still does have, as I think I said earlier, the best collection of games. They get a lot of the social networking apps first. They have terrific service and support. So there are a lot of good things about Apple beyond some of the specs and performance issues that I was talking about. So just to recap, we have the Samsung Galaxy S7, we have the LG G5, we have the Apple iPhone 6s. These are all great phones, obviously. If you're looking for a removable battery, if that's your number one feature, you got to get this LG G5. And you got to wait for our final review of the final unit, which we haven't gotten. And the G5's slim, it's metal, it's big with this 5.3-inch screen. It has that nice new Snapdragon 820 processor, memory card slot. It does have a lot of things going for it. The S7, so far, the S7 and the S7 Edge are the finest phones I've tested this year. Such a bright screen, faster focus in low light, waterproof, really nice body, great performance. A lot of good things to say about the S7. iPhone, it's still an iPhone. If all of your friends have iPhones, if you rely on iOS apps, if you're into gaming, if you're into jumping on the new social networks first, iOS will really do it for you. If you need help and you want to be able to go to any Genius bar, that's the Apple trick. Maybe the cameras aren't quite up to the S5 and the S7 and G5 levels, but Apple still has a lot going for it. So that's what I hope is a relatively impartial rundown of a lot of the features and a lot of the differences between these three flagship phones, which we have in right now. Thanks for watching, and please watch our video shows on Facebook every day at 10 a.m. We have random access, and once a week on Tuesdays we have Dialed In, which is our big phone show. Thanks again. This is Sascha Segan from PCMag.com, giving you a comparison to some of the hottest phones on the market.